Welcome to anyone out there looking for a little bit of help with absolute values. So I know we talked about this in class, but this is just going to be a small refresher if there's some pointers that you'd want. We started off by talking about the idea that I like to call bigness. So bigness says how big are our numbers, because some of them are going to be smaller, some of them are going to be larger. And it turns out that we have an official math term for that. It's called absolute value. The definition of absolute value, so the definition says essentially the distance from zero, or how far a number is from zero. The distance a number is from zero. So in a sense, the closer you are to zero, the smaller you are, the farther away you are from zero, the bigger you are. So even though -2 is negative, -5 is actually a bigger number in comparison because it's farther away from zero. We can see it right here. We write absolute value with vertical bars. So if I say the absolute value of -5, just like I have right there, it will look something like this. Vertical bars around our -5. I could also say the absolute value of -2. Now, because we're talking about distance from zero, unless you're in a physics class, we're going to denote distance as being a positive number. So the distance -5 is from 0 is 5, and the distance -2 is from 0 is -2. And that's why we can say that some negative numbers are bigger than some positive numbers, because that negative number is farther away from 0. In just a moment, we're going to go through some simple, some basic, and some moderate absolute value problems. So when you look at ones like this is in our simple category. It's really just testing, do you understand the definition of absolute value? Right here, the absolute value of -3. How far is -3 from 0? Well, it's 3 units away. What about 24? How far away is 24 from 0? It's 24. Even if you have decimals, this is a nice one, you can have crazy ones, you're still asking the same question. Absolute value of -0.75, how far away is that from 0? Essentially, any number that gets put inside of an absolute value becomes positive. If it was already positive, hey, not really much to do, drop those bars and move along. What to watch out for is that even though an absolute value must give you a positive answer, the whole answer to the question could still be negative. And let's take a look at some of these to see if that actually happens. When working with absolute values, make sure to work on them one at a time. You can't mesh them together. So for instance, right here, I see the absolute value of -6. Well, I know that that's 6. The absolute value of 5 is 5. And that plus sign in the middle drops down with it as well. And our final answer would be 11, 6 plus 5. Let's take a look down here. Now we've got multiple numbers inside the absolute value. That's alright. When you have numbers and different operations inside the absolute value, the order of operations still applies. So order of, I'm just going to say ops. And don't get, freaked out by it. Just kind of go as you would normally. I see a plus, I see a minus. Okay, no priority, so I'm going left to right. That would be 7 minus 12, putting the 1 and 6 together. Ooh, that gives us a negative still inside the absolute value, and when we take that, it gives us a positive 5 in the end. Let's circle this answer up here too. This one over here, again, work on absolute values one at a time. So we got the 7. That minus sign is outside the absolute value, so it stays minus. Absolute value of 9 is 9. Here's another minus outside the parenthesis, or outside the absolute value, so it stays minus. But this right here, this -3 is inside. How far away is -3 from 0? 3. Now let's look at this one. Going left to right, 7 minus 9 would be -2. -2 minus 3 gives us -5. So our overall answer is negative, but the individual pieces right here, each one of those individual pieces was positive. We had these minus signs outside that were unaffected by the absolute values, so in the end our final answer was negative. That's nothing to really worry about there. Let's take a look at this problem down low. The absolute value of -4 would be a +4. This +2 is outside, so I'm not going to worry about it, and we got a times right there. Absolute value of -3 would be 3. And now we have another order of ops. Let's see. Multiplication comes first, so I got to turn that into a 6. 6 plus 4 gives us 10. So our final answer was 10. But notice one of our answers in the end was negative, at the very, very end. So it is possible. Watch out, just trust in your order of operations and it won't steer you in the wrong direction. Here we have some moderate examples. These are a little bit more challenging because there's more going on with them, so let's take a look. Inside here we have 4 different numbers and a few operations. I see a minus, I see a times, and I see a plus. So if you are good with your order of operations, we got to take care of that times first. 3 minus 24 plus 7. Now we just have addition and subtraction, so it's time to go left to right. 3 minus 24 would give you a negative, let's say 21. I guess I wrote my 1 too early. Still got plus 7. And if you were to take negative 21 plus 7, you would get negative 14, still inside the absolute values. But absolute value says how far away is this number from 0, and it turned into a positive 14. Over here, we have our double absolute value problem. You could even say absolute value inception because they're inside one another. Just like parentheses, you're going to want to work from the innermost absolute value to the outermost. So taking a look, we have a 2 minus 6 all the way on the inside. 2 minus 6 would give us a negative 4. It's still in the absolute value sign. We got this plus 3 we didn't touch, and that's still in the larger absolute value sign. The absolute value of negative 4 would be positive 4, and it loses its absolute value. We didn't use the plus 3 yet, so it's still sticking around. And now we just got good old 3 plus 4, which gives us 7. How far away is 7 from 0? The answer is 7. So please do be careful when you're working with absolute values. Things to watch out for. Work on them one at a time individually. If you have multiple absolute values inside each other, work with the inner one first and then build your way outwards. And just because absolute values have to always give you positive numbers, that does not mean that your final answer cannot still be negative, just like we saw right here with our minus 5. Working with positive numbers, if you subtract them, you get negatives. So just be careful and watch out for that. I hope this was helpful, and I will talk to you later.